I've always been a night owl. There's something about the stillness of the night, the way the world feels quieter, more intimate, that drew me in. Every night after dinner, I'd lace up my shoes and head out for a walk through my neighborhood. It became my ritual, a time to clear my mind. The streets were usually empty, with only the occasional hum of a distant car or the flicker of a street lamp breaking the silence. But last Thursday night, something changed. I remember the air being heavier than usual, thick with an odd humidity that clung to my skin. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, I felt it, this strange sensation, like I was being watched. I brushed it off as paranoia. After all, nothing ever happens in my sleepy little town. But halfway through my usual route, I noticed something unusual. A single figure, standing motionless under a flickering streetlight. They were too far to make out any details, but they stood unnaturally still, almost like a statue. I laughed nervously to myself and kept walking, convincing myself it was probably just someone waiting for a ride or taking a smoke break. But as I turned the corner, the street lamp ahead of me flickered, and there they were again. Closer this time. I froze. How did they get there so quickly? My pulse quickened as I realized their face was still hidden in the shadows, but their head tilted ever so slightly, as if they were watching me. That was when I heard it. A faint whisper, so soft I almost thought I imagined it. But it wasn't coming from the figure. It was coming from the darkness behind me. I've always found comfort in the stillness of the night, the way the world falls quiet, the hum of traffic disappears and the shadows stretch long and unbroken. It's always felt oddly calming. My nightly walks had become a ritual of sorts. Every evening around 11 p.m., I'd grab my jacket, lace up my sneakers, and head out to wander the sleepy streets of my neighborhood. It was predictable, uneventful, and safe, or so I thought. Last Thursday started like any other night. Dinner had been a quiet affair, the kind where the clinking of utensils feels louder than the conversation. By the time the clock struck 11, I was ready to step outside. The air was heavier than usual, sticky, with a strange warmth that didn't fit January's usual cold bite. I shrugged it off, figuring the weather had taken another one of its strange turns. The first 20 minutes of my walk were normal. The familiar stretch of road, the houses with their neatly trimmed lawns, and the occasional porch light flickering like a dying firefly. It was all the same. But as I turned onto Westcott Avenue, a peculiar feeling washed over me. It was faint at first, like a nagging thought at the back of your mind, whispering that something was off. My skin prickled, and I glanced over my shoulder instinctively. Nothing. Just the empty street behind me, stretching out into the dark. I shook my head, laughing softly at myself. "You're imagining things," I muttered, trying to break the tension. But that sense of being watched wouldn't leave me. Halfway down the street, I noticed something strange. A figure standing perfectly still under a flickering street lamp. They were far enough that I couldn't make out much detail, but their silhouette was sharp against the dim light. Too sharp. They weren't moving. No shuffling of feet, no phone in hand. Not even the rise and fall of breath you'd expect from someone waiting for a ride or simply loitering. They were just standing there. I hesitated. My heart gave a little jolt as I debated turning around, but I forced myself to keep going. "It's just someone out late," I reasoned. "You're overthinking it." As I approached, I tried to steal glances without being obvious. They wore a dark coat, long, almost reaching their ankles. Their head was slightly tilted to the side, as if they were watching me, but their face was hidden, swallowed by the shadows of the hood they wore. "Good evening," I said, my voice awkwardly breaking the silence. No response, not even a nod. I quickened my pace, pretending not to care, but my ears were straining for the sound of footsteps. None came. When I turned the next corner, I glanced back. The street lamp was flickering again, but the figure was gone. For a moment, I felt relief. Maybe they'd gone inside or taken another route. But as I walked further, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The street lamp ahead of me was flickering too, and standing directly beneath it, closer this time, was the same figure. My heart thundered in my chest. My throat went dry. There was no way they could have gotten here before me. Not unless... I didn't let myself finish the thought. Instead, I focused on walking, faster but not running. My ears were ringing now, but above the noise, I heard something soft. A whisper. It wasn't coming from the figure. No, it was behind me. A soft, breathy sound, like someone speaking a language I didn't understand. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I felt the air grow colder. Slowly, I turned my head, my body stiff with fear. The street behind me was empty, but the whispering didn't stop. It grew louder, like it was wrapping around me, closing in. My legs moved before my brain caught up, breaking into a full sprint toward my house. I didn't look back. I didn't care about the figure, the whispers, or the way the shadows seemed to reach for me as I ran past. All I could think about was getting home. When I reached my driveway, I fumbled with my keys, my hands trembling so badly that I almost dropped them. I finally got the door open, slamming it shut behind me and locking it with shaking fingers. My house was silent. Too silent. I leaned against the door, catching my breath, and that's when I noticed it. A single muddy footprint on the floor, leading into the darkness of my hallway. I stood frozen, staring at the muddy footprint. My breath caught in my throat as I tried to process what I was seeing. The print was large, slightly smudged, but unmistakably fresh. I hadn't even made it far enough into the house to track in mud myself, and the print. It was leading away from the door, deeper into the house. The whispering I'd heard outside was gone, replaced by a suffocating silence that seemed to press against my ears. My pulse thundered, the blood rushing so loudly in my head that I could barely think straight. I gripped the doorknob tightly, debating whether I should fling the door open and run back outside. But where would I go? Whoever or whatever had left that print was already inside. Taking a shaky breath, I forced myself to move. The hallway ahead was shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from the faint glow of the street lamp outside, filtering through the window. My phone was still in my pocket. I pulled it out and switched on the flashlight. The beam of light sliced through the darkness, illuminating the hallway. The footprint led further in, stopping just at the edge of the kitchen tile. I followed it slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. "Hello?" My voice was barely above a whisper. It felt stupid to say anything, but the silence was unbearable. "Is someone there?" No answer. As I stepped into the kitchen, I felt a chill in the air. The temperature had dropped significantly, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones. I swept the flashlight around the room. The chairs were neatly pushed under the table. The sink was empty. The back door was locked. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, except for the fridge door. It was slightly ajar, the faint hum of the motor louder than usual. My heart sank as I stared at it. Slowly, I reached out, my fingers trembling as they touched the cold metal handle. I pulled it open in one swift motion, my flashlight aimed inside. Nothing. Just shelves of leftovers, drinks, and condiments. I let out a shaky breath, relief washing over me. Then I heard it, the whisper. It was faint but clear, coming from just behind me. A single word spoken in a voice that wasn't mine, wasn't human. "Run!" I spun around, the flashlight shaking in my grip. The kitchen was empty, but the air felt thicker now, heavier, like something unseen was pressing against me. The whisper came again, louder this time. "Run!" I didn't need to be told a third time. I bolted for the front door, my sneakers skidding against the hardwood floor. I reached for the knob, but my hand froze midair. The door was wide open. I hadn't left it that way. Something was standing just outside, silhouetted against the glow of the street lamp. The same figure from before. But now I could see them more clearly. Their hood had slipped back slightly, revealing a face, or what should have been a face. Instead, there was nothing. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just smooth, pale skin stretched taut over a featureless skull. They tilted their head again, just like before, and stepped forward. My flashlight flickered and went out. The whispers erupted all around me, louder, overlapping, a chaotic chorus that I couldn't escape. My legs refused to move, my body rooted in place as the figure entered my house. They raised a hand, long fingers, impossibly thin, and pointed directly at me. The whispers stopped, replaced by a single deafening sound. A distorted scream that tore through my mind, rattling my very soul. And then, nothing. When I woke up, I was lying on my front porch, my head pounding and my vision blurry. The sun was rising, casting the neighborhood in soft golden light. My front door was closed, locked, as if nothing had happened. But as I sat up, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There on the wooden planks of the porch was a single muddy footprint,